in our country, that is the Lok Sabha elections, and to look at what it means and where we are likely to go from here, and what civil society and all of us need to do in order to improve things in this country. So in order to understand the verdict of 2024 Lok Sabha, we first need to look at the context. I wanted to ask, would the majority of the people want me to speak in English or in Hindi? Unfortunately, I cannot speak Kannada. So, uh, English. All right. So, we need to understand the context in which this election took place. So we need to see what was really happening in this country in the last 5 or 10 years. And what was really happening was that there was a brutal assault on every value that is enunciated in our constitution, in our democracy. There was an assault on fundamental rights, all fundamental rights, including the right to liberty, the right to speech, the right to equality. Large numbers of people across the country were arrested and put in jails, usually on false charges, such as some of our finest human rights activists were jailed, and many of them are still languishing in jail. In the Bhima Koregaon case, in the Delhi riots cases, and on various charges of sedition or under the unlawful, these various draconian laws like the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act or the Prevention of Money Laundering Act or the National Security Act, etc. There was an assault on speech, and the assault took two forms. One was the strangulation of the mainstream media and the control of the mainstream media, and it was made an instrument of propaganda and hate by the ruling party, by the BJP. And the other was to prevent other people from speaking out against the government or saying things which were not liked by the government. Many of them were arrested, their social media accounts were taken down on the orders of the government. So all these things have been happening. There is an assault on equality, of course. There is a assault on all minorities in the country, on the streets, on the social media, and indeed by some laws which were brought in as well. We have been seeing public lynchings of particularly members of the Muslim community, breaking of churches, vandalizing of churches across the country and especially in Manipur. We have been seeing uh, absolutely false and defamatory allegations being made against Muslims of this country, particularly against Muslims and also against other minorities. And we also saw the Citizenship Amendment Act, which was brought in, which was a clearly discriminatory law, discriminating against Muslims in particular. There was a wholesale assault on all the institutions, all the democratic institutions of this country. Assault meaning there's an attempt to control them and make them an instrument of the ruling party. That assault extended, of course, to the media, also to the judiciary, also to the election commission, also to parliament, also to all the investigative agencies, including Enforcement Directorate, CBI, Income Tax, NIA, all these investigative institutions were essentially made an instrument, a political instrument of the ruling party to harass and intimidate those that the ruling party did not like, whether they were opposition politicians, whether they were activists, whether they were journalists. There was an assault on the independence of the Election Commission by appointing totally compromised and uh, people who were under the control of the government. For a long time in this country, after TN session, the Election Commission remained an independent institution to conduct free and fair elections in India. But in the last 6-7 years, we have seen that the independence of the Election Commission has been thoroughly compromised and it has essentially become an instrumentality of the BJP. Even the Comptroller and Auditor General. There was a time when the Comptroller and Auditor General was regarded as a very independent institution, auditing and exposing the corruption in all departments of the government. But now we are seeing in the last few years that the Comptroller and Auditor General has virtually stopped doing most of the audits of public finances that it was doing, and it is functioning largely at the behest of the government. The best example of that was in the Rafale deal, where before the CAG's report came out, the government gave a note in a sealed envelope to the Supreme Court saying that the CAG has audited this Rafale deal. The audit has found nothing wrong with it. This audit report has been also placed in the Parliament. All this was false. And they further said that in this audit, the pricing details of these aircrafts has been removed. Now, firstly, it was totally false. The audit had not been done. How did the government know that the pricing details of the Rafale audit would not be there in the audit? Obviously, the government had instructed the CAG not to put pricing details in the audit. That was a clear example of how the CAG was functioning at the behest of the government and not independently. See, the CAG, like the Election Commission, over the years had become, despite the fact that both the CAG and the Election Commission were being appointed by the government, but it had developed an institutional independence which was quite robust. But in the last few years, that those institutions have also, the independence of those institutions has also been destroyed. Similarly, the National Human Rights Commission and these kind of agencies were also completely compromised and brought under the control of the government. The gentleman who heads the National Human Rights Commission currently is one Justice Arun Mishra, whose only claim to fame, or he has several claims to fame actually. One of them is that he gave a benefit of more than 20,000 crores to Adani, and sometimes during vacations in totally illegal hearings. The other claim to fame is that he dismissed that Birla Sahara case in which we had sought an independent investigation into the documents recovered by the CBI from the offices of Birla and Sahara, which showed that Modi had been paid 40 crores by the Sahara companies and 25 crores by the Birla company. He dismissed it by saying that no, these are loose papers. Nothing, no investigation can be ordered on the basis of loose papers. He did not give a single judgment in his entire career in the Supreme Court against the government. And there are any number of judgments that he gave in favor of the government. His first act after becoming chairman of the National Human Rights Commission was to hold a seminar on how human rights organizations are working against human rights. That's the National Human Rights Commission for you, what it has been reduced to. And the same thing has been happening to various other institutions, including educational institutions like the UGC, the NCERT, this NTC, this NTA, which conducts these educational examinations, and the universities. In virtually all the universities controlled by the central government, vice chancellors who have been appointed are all RSS people, almost all RSS people. They are people who have no understanding of education. The current chairman of the UGC, who was earlier the vice chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University, he said that we have to put tanks and aircrafts in the campus of JNU in order to instill nationalism among the students. He stopped debates, discussions, seminars, etc. on the campuses of JNU. These are the kind of vice chancellors who have been put in these universities. There was organized propagation of hate and falsehood by this government. And through the media, mainstream media which they controlled. There was a very, very well thought out and conscious attempt to create a personality cult around Modi. There were instructions in writing issued to all the state governments that whenever photographs of a chief minister are published anywhere, the photograph of the prime minister should also be there, and the prime minister's photo should be at least 50% bigger than the photo of the chief minister. Everything was revolving around Modi, Modi, Modi on the vaccine certificates, on ration bags, everywhere Modi's photo was put up. Very, very well organized. Tens of thousands of crores were spent by the government on just propagating this face and this name and this personality cult. There was an assault on the constitution, and we know that if the BJP had won, then there were several ministers who had gone on record to say that we will change the constitution, we will convert India into a Hindu Rashtra. And there was an assault on civility itself by means of having destruction of the rule of law, public lynchings on the streets, promotion of lawlessness and violence, promotion of bulldozers to bulldoze homes of people that the government did not like, particularly minorities, by just making some false accusation against them without that accusation being proved in any court of law, and thereafter going and bulldozing their homes. It's a double illegality. Firstly, you have not proved whether that person has committed any offense. Secondly, even if you have proved that, you cannot bulldoze their homes. That is totally against the law. You can punish them in accordance with law. You can't bulldoze their homes. People who spoke against the government were being vilified on the social media. They were being abused. If they were women, they were being threatened with rape. People were being threatened with murder and so on. And this whole troll army which the BJP set up on the social media was controlled by Mr. Modi himself, as disclosed and exposed by this journalist Swati Chaturvedi in her book I Am a Troll. That this whole troll army that the BJP had, whose job was only to abuse, threaten, and vilify people, spread hate, spread fake news, etc., that this whole troll army was controlled by Mr. Modi himself. So this was the context in which this 24 election was fought. And the election was a totally unequal fight. On the one hand, we had this party which controlled almost all the money in the electoral bonds. Also, they collected more than 50% of the money, just one party, and the remaining 50% went to other political parties. But more than that, they used all government money as well as all the instrumentalities of the government for their election propaganda. The election commission was under their control and was behaving in a totally partisan manner, not preventing gross violations of the model code of conduct by the government and allowing and stopping the opposition leaders occasionally from even doing legitimate things. The accounts of many opposition parties were frozen by the government so as to deprive them even of the small or little funds that they had. Therefore, the opposition fought this election with their hands tied behind their backs. And the judiciary, unfortunately, was turning a blind eye to all this. There were speakers who were behaving this in Maharashtra. The symbol uh, of the Shiv Sena was given to this Shinde. I mean, who was nobody. He was just picked up by the BJP and he brought a few MLAs along with him, and therefore they were able to break uh, the opposition government and form a BJP Shiv Sena government. And this fellow was recognized as the real Shiv Sena despite the fact that he had very little support within the party. And yet the Supreme Court did nothing. And we were seeing this repeatedly, that there is this bulldozers going on everywhere. This is a bulldozing of the rule of law in this country. But the Supreme Court was doing nothing. And today there is this sort of large scale mischief going on in this country of various people in various parts of the country saying that this mosque is built over the remains of a temple 400 years ago. This is an inquiry into this or any suit for reclaiming that mosque is prohibited by the places of worship act, and yet this mischief is being allowed to go on, and it is going on even in the full gaze of the Supreme Court. Yesterday or 2-3 days ago, the UP government has issued orders that on this Kamad Yatra route, the vendors have to put up their names so that people can know whether they are Hindu or Muslim, etc. Totally illegal order. They have no authority in law to pass such an order. But unfortunately, out of fear, the vendors are complying, all these street vendors and other shop owners, etc. And the whole object of this is to create further communal polarization, to isolate and boycott the Muslim vendors, and perhaps to even wreak mob violence on these Muslim vendors. And all this is happening, and unfortunately, I mean, there is a complete trampling of our constitutional values and rule of law going on in this country. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court has largely turned a blind eye to all this, which is very, very unfortunate. But thank God for the alternate media. Despite so many disadvantages that the opposition had in this election, the one advantage that they had was that the alternate media had come up, and alternate media had come up on the internet, and this was print as well as YouTube, visual media. And fortunately for us, in the last few years, the whole digital revolution and the communication revolution and the IT revolution has created a situation where the majority of the people in this country have a smartphone. Now, most people now no longer watch news on television because these television media houses are totally discredited, but also because they find it more convenient to watch on their smartphones. And in this situation, many good journalists who were fed up with the functioning of the mainstream media, which had been turned into instruments of hate and propaganda by this government, they came out and set up their own media organizations on the internet as well as YouTube channels. And fortunately for us, this alternate media became not only very prominent, but in my view, more influential, more powerful than the mainstream media. And to a very large extent, the result of this election is due to this alternate media which came up. So this was one advantage. In fact, there is this woman who heads this ANI news service, which is a totally government-controlled Godi media news service. Her name is Smita Prakash, and she holds a podcast called Smita Prakash with four samosas. That's the title of her podcast. And there were these four idiots sitting with her, and they were discussing in one of the podcasts that look, the alternate media the alternate media, if you look at the viewerships and the number of views of people on YouTube, you find that the first 27, the top 27 are all that side. She says that side meaning in the opposition camp and against the BJP. And she says, our side comes only at item 28. So all the top 27 YouTube channels were, according to her, on the other side. So this has been a very important development which has been very critical to achieving this election result, and we should recognize that. The where is here next? Huh? Where? Zubair. Is he here? No, I don't think he's here. He lives in Bangalore, I know, but actually he probably would not have known. Yes. But there are many such people on the social media, people on YouTube, people on Twitter, people on Facebook, people on, though Facebook is a thoroughly compromised platform, it's totally, to a very large extent, also controlled by the government. Uh, but at least YouTube and Twitter are to a very large extent still relatively free, despite the continuous attempts of the government to control these also. And Zubair is one example of a person who has been using his presence on Twitter to do a fantastic job of giving you the right information, exposing fake news, all kinds of things. So there are many such people. These are the real heroes of today who have managed to change public opinion despite all this control over media, over money, over instruments of propaganda, and everything, over the election commission, etc. Despite all these advantages that the government had, to a very large extent, they were neutralized by this alternate media. Now, the election results. So, of course, as was pointed out by Mr. Pasha, the election results are clearly a political defeat for the BJP and Mr. Modi. It was evident, firstly, that instead of 400 par, they were reduced to 240. It was evident from the faces of Mr. Modi. It is evident from their morale of the BJP and Mr. Modi today, and it is evident from the morale of the opposition also. Because you can see that after the elections, the BJP and Mr. Modi and all their supporters seem to be very dejected. Their morale is down, they are very crestfallen. But the morale of the opposition is up, as you could see in this parliament session when the opposition was speaking vis-a-vis when the ruling party people were speaking. It was clear that the opposition views, both the ruling party and the opposition views this result as a defeat for the BJP and a victory for the opposition, despite the fact that the BJP is still in government. But the question is, was it a vote against the communal politics of the BJP? I would say that I would slightly differ with Mr. Pasha here. Despite the fact that the BJP lost Ayodhya and they lost the majority of the seats in UP, which is their sort of stronghold, I do not think that it represents a very clear and decisive defeat of communal politics in this country. The defeat of the BJP was on account of several factors. Of course, one of the factors was that the alternate media had come up, and the alternate media was fortunately largely saying the right things and was largely against the BJP, the alternate media which had come up. It was also, I think, one of the reasons for the BJP's defeat was the overexposure of Mr. Modi and this attempt to create a personality cult around Mr. Modi and have the whole election revolve around Modi was a counterproductive strategy, and it backfired in multiple ways. I think the people were fed up of this kind of glorifying of one individual and creation of a personality cult and trying to make him into a demigod or even a god like Mr. Modi himself tried to do by saying that